Hello, welcome to part 30 of the Angular Complete series represented by tutorial polls, template-driven form validations. As we know already, most of the logic in template-driven forms is derived in HTML. When working on an enterprise application, it is a very common requirement implementation to intimate the user when he or she tries to enter any input which can't be accepted. Also, in many scenarios, we want to enforce the user to enter a value in the fields which can't be left blank, which means a field is required. The requirement implementation is considered as validations. Let's begin by browsing already supported validations available in Angular. Required validation can be used on all the input fields and makes form field required. Min and max validators are used on number type data fields. These validations can be used to keep the min and max value allowed in the input control. Next is email validator, used on a string input to validate if the entered input is a valid email format or not. Min length and max length validators can be used on string inputs again. Min length and max length validators are used to limit the minimum and maximum number of characters allowed to be entered in the text box field. Enough of theory. Let's see it in action. As you can see here, we have our form to capture book details. We created it in part 28, with the only difference that I have added this book form title here and wrote required CSS in addBookComponent.scss as you can see here. Alright, as you can see, our application is running already and this is how our add book forms looks like. Let's add a required field validator on the title field. Before that, just inspect the title field and see it here in the class list. We have 3 classes added already and see here in the HTML, we don't have any class specified. Actually, Angular applies these classes based on the state of the control. And that's not it. Along with all controls, Angular also applies these classes on the form element. So here we have the same set of 3 classes added on the form. What to remember from here is Angular have 3 groups of states. As you can see here, touched and untouched, pristine and dirty, then valid, invalid and pending. At any given point in time, control state will be in one of the states from these state groups. Angular has corresponding classes for each of these states, which Angular adds in control. Form state is derived from the controls it has inside. So, for example, you can see here, currently all the form fields are pristine, untouched and valid. Valid because we don't have any validations in place yet. And also, the form state is same to each of these controls. Now if we focus inside the title and see, the untouched state has been changed to touched. This is fine because we have touched this title field now. Also, see form class also changed to touched because we have touched one of the form fields. Alright, now let's add the required field validator in the title field. So type required. That's it. We have marked our title field as required. Now observe the console and see the title field has untouched, pristine and invalid class because the field is required and we have not entered the title yet. Also see the form. The state is invalid. Now let's just do one thing. Disable the submit button if the form is invalid, which will stop the user from submitting invalid form data. So type here square brackets disabled inside and type bookform.invalid as value. The invalid is a ngForm property and it will be true only when the form is invalid. On contrary to invalid property, we have a property named as valid, which is true when form is valid. Also in the addBook component TS, copy this book form argument from getValue function and paste it in logbook details. And inside just type console log bookform.invalid. Now in HTML, pass this book form as input. When the log button is clicked, save the changes and see the browser. See, this submit button has been disabled and we can't click on this. Click on the log details button and see it's logging invalid as true. Sometimes, based on our preferences, we don't disable the submit button using invalid or valid flags. Instead, what we do, we allow the user to submit the form, and in the code, we check whether the form is valid or not, and accordingly we intimate to the user. Logically, we have added the required field validator on the title field, but it does not make sense only to add validation and leave the user at the mercy of God why his form is not saving. We need to actually convey to the user what is going wrong with the form. So let's add a div here, and then inside add a paragraph tag and then text as title is required. On p tag add a condition *ng if. Now here inside double quotes we need to pass an expression that will evaluate to true if required field validation fails. Similar to ngForm template variable, define a variable as #titleref equals ngModel to access the form control instance. We can give any name here, but let's give it titleref for better reference to the title. Now here type titleref.invalid. We can also type here not and then titleref.valid, which will mean if the title is not valid, then show this message. Why too complicate when we have a straight property available? So let's use invalid property here. Remove this not, save the changes and see on the browser. The message is displayed, and if you type here inside anything, message will go away because we have added the title which was required. This is fine. At least we are conveying to the user what's wrong with the form data. The problem with this invalid property is that when we have more than one validator and if one of them fails, it will be true. It becomes difficult to show separate messages for each of the validators in UI. The better way would be to use errors property. Errors property returns an object of key value pair for each of the failing validation. Let's add a p tag here to see what we get inside errors object. Open the component ES and change this getValue function argument as of type any and argument name as val. Replace bookForm.value with val. Now in HTML here, instead of passing the book form, pass the bookForm.value. Copy and paste this p tag and replace bookForm with titleref.errors to see the errors object. Also add a text here as title errors : save the changes and see the browser. See here we are getting the failing validation object that is required with value as true. Type some value inside and see it is null because all of the validations have passed. Now let's see what happens when we have more than one validator on one field. Let's add min length validation to this title field to force user enter at least 5 characters for the title. So type min length equals 5. Save the changes and observe the browser. See, it is showing only required validation is failing. Type A and C. Now it is showing min length validation is failing. That is because min length validation works only when you enter some value or only on defined fields. Also notice min length value is an object. So if you want to use these specific informations from the min length validation, we can use these properties. Alright, now replace the validation message condition with titleref.errors.required and also copy paste it and replace message as enter at least 5 characters. Change the required with min length. Though min length will hold an object as we have seen, but expression will evaluate to true if the property is defined. Alright, save the changes and see the browser. Now initially it displays as title is required, but when you type and until 5 characters, it shows the message as enter at least 5 characters, which is what was expected. But see here, we have exceeded the characters length above 5, but message has not gone yet. Open the console and see, we have an error. And here you see it is showing the file name where the error happened. Click on this file and see it's here in required expression. The reason is as soon as we enter some value in title field, required validation goes away, but min length validation gets in. And until we have 5 characters, errors object is not null. As soon as we type 5th character, all the validations gets passed and object becomes null. That is, errors object becomes null. Excess of properties on null triggers this error. Alright, let's add a question mark here and here. So it makes sure properties required and min length are accessed. Errors object is not null. Save the changes and see the browser. Type something in title field and see it is working as expected. And also when you exceed 5 characters, all the validations gets passed. So far everything is good. But the error messages are not looking like validation messages. Let's add some CSS classes. For the sake of time, as you can see here in components CSS file, I have one class already written here under form control, where I am trying to access the state class ng-invalid. So what this CSS mean is add these CSS properties on the element which has a form class along with ng-invalid class. Also you see here I have also written another class named as validation message with some CSS properties. See here in add-book.html, added validation message class on tip. Save the changes and see the browser. Our title field background is red. That is because from the CSS. And this is invalid initially and it has the form control class. Also, this text box background will remain red until all the validations pass. Type book name as A and see it is still red because min length validation is still failing. Complete it as Angular and see all the validations have been passed and classes are removed. Also, did you notice our submit button? Let's reload the form and type Angular again. See, submit button is getting enabled as soon as we have a valid form or as soon as all the validators are getting passed. Everything seems working fine for add book forms title field, but no. We have a slight problem here. Validation message and red background of text box is displayed as soon as user is landing on the page, which is not considered as good user experience because user has not done anything on form yet. So better way would be to show the validations only when the form is submitted by the user. One way is either we can use dirty and test flags to show the validation messages when the form field is dirty or user has make any change, or other way if the user has touched. Either way we can do it depending upon requirement. In my case, I am going to demonstrate the submitted flag, that is show the validations when the form is submitted. So what we can do is in HTML remove this disabled attribute from submit button and let the user submit the form whenever he wants. Here on validations div add asterisk ng if inside say form.submitted. And here in components CSS file change this form control class name as displayError. Now we are saying that apply this ng-invalid CSS only on the elements which has displayError class. Now in HTML bind here displayErrors class using class binding. Type here square bracket inside class dot display hyphen error and then inside book form dot submitted. If the form has been submitted, add the displayError class in the title field. So when the form has been submitted and title field is invalid, it will show the red background of text box. Alright, save the changes and observe the browser. See, we don't have any error displayed on UI. Click on submit button and see validation fired. Looks great, right? Let's open the browser and visit the URL angular.io/API/forms/ng form. And see here, we have submit output property which can be used to bind a function to trigger on submit. Also see ng form options property which can be used to provide the configuration to the form object. We will not change anything in ng form configuration. Let it live with default. Let's add a callback function when the form is submitted. First, define a function in ts file as public save book complete function brackets and receive book form of type ng form as input argument. And inside form, just check if bookform.valid, then console log book has been added. Now copy the function name and in HTML on this form element, add submit output property of form. Add parenthesis inside submit and pass the function name as callback handler. Also pass the book form as input argument. Now save the changes and click on submit button and see validation has been fired, but no message has been logged in console. Now add title as Angular and click on submit button again. And see, message is logged because form is valid now and our valid flag evaluates to true. What happens if we change the button type as button, not the submit? Change it to button. Save the changes and in the browser click on button. Nothing happened. No validation fired. The reason is submit button is not submitting form now. So what we can do is cut this submit and function from form element and paste it on button and change submit to click. Save the changes, open the developer window. Under source, press Ctrl+P and search file name as add_book component and open this TS file. Add a breakpoint here inside on save function. Click on submit button and see function is firing but validations are not firing. Open the add_book component TS file and type a variable as public is submitted of type boolean. So this flag we will use to identify whether the form has been submitted or our submit button has been clicked. Now inside on save check if not this dot is submitted, then curly brackets inside type this dot is submitted equals true. Open the HTML and replace bookform.submitted with our new is submitted flag. So here replace this bookform.submitted with is submitted flag. Also here in class binding replace this with is submitted. Save the changes and see the browser. No validation failure being displayed. Click on submit button and see validations gets fired. In add_book component TS, remove getValue function. Also console log this dot book object. Now in HTML, remove both of these p tags and remove this log button. Now let me add couple of more validations. To save time, let me add them offline. Alright, now see here. I have added required and min length validation on author field. Also changed the template variable name as authorref. See here added required validation on category ID field and changed the template variable name as category ref. And the last one also has only required validation on price field. Change the template variable name as price ref. Also see here validation messages for author category and price has been changed accordingly. Alright, save the changes and see the browser. Click on submit button and see all fields are showing validations as expected. Enter the title as Angular and author as Google. Select category and price as 20. Click on submit and observe the console. See, we have a message printed along with entered values in book object. Now we can send this book object to server, which we will see moving forward how, but not here in this lecture. One last thing for your note. Similar to click event, we can add change, blur and other supported events on the controls callback listeners. As we have seen already in part 27 select control, where we added change listener. Alright, we know now how to create the template driven form with front-end validations and also have explored different capabilities in template driven form. If you liked the video, please do like and share the video. Also, if you find this video helpful, please do subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon to show your support as it will motivate me to create more stuff. With that being said, thank you and see you in the next lecture.